Hello there, everybody. This is Rob, the baseball time traveler. Thanks for joining me as I present to you my first episode of 1930s baseball. The focus is going to be on a young man named Joe DiMaggio. But before we get there, I just want to give you a brief overview of the 1930s. We have bookends of two iconic names. Babe Ruth, as we started the 1930s, was kind of at the height of his powers. And toward the end of the decade, Lou Gehrig, we lost him to eventually ALS, the disease that was later named after him, Lou Gehrig's disease. At the beginning of the 1930s, Babe Ruth was the man, and he was a character that was at the height of his baseball powers and certainly was recognized around the world. This is a 1929 Churchman's Cigarettes card, which was produced in England, and he was such a wide-known, iconic figure in the United States that baseball, he was identified as U.S. baseball. I have the entire Churchman set from 1929. You can see some of the sports that were presented there. There's ice hockey there in the middle right, and you've got field hockey. You got all sorts of stuff. But the fact that Babe Ruth was identified as the main man in early 1930s baseball really showed his importance. Here's a photograph of Babe. This is his last game as a New York Yankee, September 30th, 1934. And to just show you how important Babe was toward that period of time, here in 1935, we have the same card put out by different manufacturers, this 1935 Edwards Ringer and Big card, but it's the same card, Baseball USA, and it's just a beautiful card. And Babe stepped away from the game, and then a young man kind of took the baton from there, and his name was Lou Gehrig. Now, I don't have any playing days Gehrig cards just yet in my collection, but this is pretty close. It was nice to be able to have a who's who in baseball, great little booklet, and Lou graced the cover here. Also have a more modern card, if you will. This is 1961 Topps commemorating Lou's end of his streak, 2,130 games. A couple more Lou Gehrig cards, and then we'll move on to the star of the show, Joe DiMaggio. Here's a more modern card that was given to me by a close friend of mine, Dan, and commemorates Lou's career. Beautiful card. And then also this one here, commemorating the July 4th farewell Lou Gehrig at Yankee Stadium in his famous luckiest man in the world speech. Okay, now we'll move to Joltin' Joe DiMaggio. We go back to 1932, and Joe was a 17-year-old young man who was working for his dad as a fisherman, but really didn't enjoy it. His older brother Vince was playing baseball with the San Francisco Seals. And as it turns out, as a 17-year-old, Joe was showing some real promise. But so his brother Vince asked the manager if he could step in as a replacement for a fellow by the name of Augie Galan, who was the starting shortstop for the Seals at that time. Augie later went on to play for the Cubs and had a relatively a decent career. But Joe replaced him and soon showed his prowess as a hitter, no question. Here's some shots of Joe as a San Francisco Seal. You can see down here, here's a color version. And the photo here is actually showing Joe as he's completing his run around the bases during the course of his 61-game hitting streak in the minor leagues. This is actually the 44th straight game, and that broke the then record for the minor leagues. And here's some articles, and you can just stop your video and read it if you'd like. But you'll notice that early on they didn't even spell Joe's name correctly. And here's an additional article. He was really making noise because of his hitting prowess, and he was considered such a great fielder, had a very, very strong arm, and was a very graceful player. And he exemplified that throughout his career. Here's a couple of modern cards that thought I'd like to show to you. It's part of a set. Mike, Sports History Collector, provided these to me, the full set, and some really nice cards. And this is Joe in his SEALs uniform, and this really tells the story of how he got his start, and then how the Yankees basically took a chance on him because he did sustain a pretty serious knee injury in 1934, but the Yankees saw some promise and they stuck with him. And in the 1935 season, he was still with the SEALs, but if you take a close look at his cap, he's got a Yankee cap on there, and that's he's got his arm around his brother Dom and a couple of other SEALs teammates. So 1936 rolls around, and Joe is getting ready to move to the major leagues. And here's an article I thought was interesting. The expectations, this was an article written in late 1935, September of 1935, and they were looking forward to having the Yankees bring DiMaggio up and going to make room for a guy named Ben Chapman. So they're going to move Chapman on, and many of you know from baseball history, Chapman had a pretty bad rep, deservedly so, in the way he treated Jackie Robinson when Jackie broke into the majors. But here's a photograph of Joe, Ben Chapman, Joe McCarthy, the manager, and Lou Gehrig. And this would be in 1937, probably. Now, what I wanted to also show you is this magazine here. And this was touting Joe as one of the up-and-coming stars. And the two players there, the photographs, are of Buddy Hassett there on the lower left. I've got his card. This is a 1939 play ball. So this is a few years after he was into the bigs. And Buddy, as it turns out, participated in the famous Johnny Vandermeer's second consecutive no-hitter in 1938. And the other player there in the upper right is Buddy Lewis, who played for the Washington Senators. And Buddy was connected to Lou Gehrig in the sense that Buddy played in Lou Gehrig's last game on April 30th, 1939. Notice the article there cites Joe DiMaggio and Stu Martin. Well, Stu Martin actually never really made it big. He was brought up originally by the Cardinals, and he really never had a baseball card. So these are the only photographs I was able to find of him. And he actually was hanging with some pretty important players there in baseball history. On the far left, there's Pepper Martin. Stu is there to Pepper's left, and then the two Dean brothers, Dizzy and Daffy, Paul Dean, are there in that photograph. And then just to flip this over, here's the article. And you probably can stop it and zoom in and read it. But this is for your reference. Nice photograph there of Joe. There's Bill Dickey on the cover of Baseball Magazine, August 1936. Thanks very much for watching. Look forward to the next video, which will be coming soon. 1930s baseball. See you next time.